He tearfully accepted his father's entire retirement fund, promising to build a family business that would make him proud. But he didn't know the business was a single, flawless diamond necklace. And she had forgotten one crucial detail. The retirement account was collateral for a forgotten business loan her father had co-signed years ago. So how do you use a single piece of jewelry and a forgotten signature to trigger a loan default that bankrupts the one person who thought they had stolen your future? For everyone who has poured their life's work into a child only to be treated like a line item on their expense report, this is your story. And for those who believe that the most dangerous debts are the ones a family forgets, stick with us. John Miller's sanctuary was not a house, but a number. $457,000. The sum total of 40 years spent welding steel beams against the Colorado sky. It was his retirement, yes, but more than that, it was the final wall of a fortress he'd built around his only daughter, Clara. It was safety. It was peace of mind. It was the quiet promise that whatever storms life threw at her, she would always have a foundation to stand on. When Clara came to him, her eyes bright with entrepreneurial fire, he saw not a risk, but a continuation of his life's work. She spoke of a boutique catering company, of artisanal cheese boards and corporate clients. A small, safe business. She showed him projections on an iPad, numbers that looked clean, professional. All she needed, she said, was a significant capital injection for the down payment on a commercial kitchen. It was his entire fund. He didn't hesitate. He sat at his simple oak kitchen table, the same table where he had helped her with homework, and signed the transfer papers. His hand, calloused from a lifetime of labor, trembled slightly as he passed his future into her care. The first cut came a week later. John called, eager to hear about the kitchen, maybe see some photos. "Dad, I'm swamped with investor meetings," Clara said, her voice strained with an impatience he had never heard before. "It's all very complex. You wouldn't understand." He hung up, a strange coldness seeping into his chest. He told himself it was just business stress. The second cut was a photo on her social media 2 weeks later. Clara at a glittering charity gala he hadn't known about, arm in arm with people whose tailored suits cost more than his car. The caption read, "Leveling up, no time for small things anymore." His daughter, a stranger, in a world he had funded but was not invited to witness. The final break came at that same gala. Wanting to show his support, John put on his only suit and drove to the downtown hotel. He felt out of place among the city's elite, an old ghost in a new world. And then, standing near a marble pillar, he heard her voice. She was talking to a woman dripping in diamonds. "The necklace is divine, Clara. Where did you find it?" the woman asked. John saw it then, a constellation of ice glittering at her daughter's throat, a piece so magnificent it seemed to pull all the light in the room towards it. Clara laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, this," she said, touching the stones with a perfectly manicured hand. "Just liquidated a tired old family asset. Sometimes you have to cut dead weight to fly." The words hit John with the force of a physical blow. Tired old family asset. Dead weight. He felt the blood drain from his face. He stumbled forward, catching her eye across the crowded room. "Clara," he began, his voice a hoarse whisper. She turned, and for a fraction of a second, He saw a flash of panic in her eyes before it was replaced by a cold fury. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You weren't invited. You're embarrassing me." His gaze dropped from her face to the necklace. "The necklace," he said, the pieces clicking together with a sickening finality. "Clara, that's my retirement. That's everything." Her face hardened. She glanced at her wealthy friend. A silent calculation passed between them. "Don't be dramatic," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's an investment, and you're making a scene." She made a subtle gesture to a nearby security guard. "Security?" she said, her voice now loud and clear. "Please escort this man out. He seems confused." The drive home from the gala was a blur of streetlights and shame. The guard, a young man with apologetic eyes, had been gentle but firm. "Sir, I have to ask you to leave." John didn't resist. He walked out of the opulent hotel lobby, past the valet line of luxury cars, and back into a world that suddenly felt alien. His suit, the best he owned, felt cheap and ill-fitting. The city's glamour, which once seemed exciting, now felt like a cruel joke. He parked his 10-year-old truck in the driveway of his small brick house, a home that now felt achingly empty. Inside, everything was as he'd left it, neat, simple, honest. A lifetime of hard work contained within 4 walls. He sat at his oak kitchen table, the silence pressing in on him, and replayed Clara's words over and over. Dead weight. Confused. It wasn't the loss of the money that shattered him. It was the chilling efficiency with which his daughter had erased his worth. Instead of succumbing to despair, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He made a call. Not to a lawyer, not yet. He called Frank, his foreman from the steel mill for 30 years, now retired and living a quiet life up in the mountains. Frank answered on the second ring, his voice a gravelly comfort. John told him everything, his own voice flat and devoid of emotion as he recounted the events, from the transfer of funds to the diamond necklace to the final brutal dismissal at the gala. Frank listened without interruption, a long silence stretching across the line after John finished. "I'm coming down," Frank finally said, the fury in his voice a stark contrast to John's numb calm. "No," John said, a strange new clarity beginning to form in his mind. "Not yet. I need you to do something for me first. Remember that little tech startup Clara tried to launch about 5 years ago? The one for an app that matched caterers with events?" Frank grunted in assent. "Barely. Another one of her bright ideas that went nowhere." "I co-signed a loan for it," John continued, the memory surfacing like a long submerged wreck. "A small business loan from Sterling Commercial Bank. I think my retirement account was the collateral." The rest of the night was spent in the dusty quiet of his basement, surrounded by 40 years of neatly organized records, tax returns, mortgage statements, car titles. John finally found it. A thin, red folder labeled C-Cater App Loan. He opened it, and there, on the second page of the Sterling Commercial Bank agreement, was the clause, stark and undeniable. "The undersigned John Miller does hereby pledge the full and complete value of the Miller Retirement Fund, account number 487B, as sole collateral for this loan." He stared at the signature line, his own steady hand, and next to it, Clara's elegant script. He had forgotten all about it. He had assumed,
trusted that she had paid it off years ago. She had never mentioned it again. She had let it lie dormant, a financial landmine waiting for the right moment. But she had made one critical mistake. In liquidating the account to buy her necklace, she had violated the terms of a legal binding contract. She hadn't just stolen from her father, she had committed bank fraud. At 9 o'clock the next morning, John Miller made a second phone call, not to his daughter, not to his friend. He called the commercial loan division of Sterling Bank and asked for the risk management department. His voice was no longer flat or weary. It was the voice of a man who welded steel at 300 feet and understood the unyielding physics of stress and consequence. "My name is John Miller," he said, his tone cool and precise. "I am the co-signer and collateral provider for loan number 7B451. I am calling to report that the collateral backing this loan has been fraudulently liquidated in its entirety by the primary borrower, Clara Miller. I expect you to take immediate and appropriate action." He didn't wait for a response. He simply hung up, the quiet click of the receiver sounding like the cocking of a hammer. He sat in his quiet kitchen, the red folder open on the table before him, and waited. It didn't take long. His phone buzzed, vibrating against the oak table. It was Clara. The text was short, stripped of its usual elegance, raw with panic. "The bank just froze all my accounts. They're talking about fraud. Dad, what did you do?" The first wave of Clara's counterattack was a flurry of text messages, a digital barrage of disbelief and wounded innocence. "Dad, how could you? This is a mistake. You have to fix this." John read them without replying. Each message a predictable move in a game he now understood all too well. When the texts failed, the voicemails began, Clara's voice escalating from confusion to tearful pleading, and finally to righteous indignation. He listened to none of them. His silence was his new shield, impenetrable and absolute. Deprived of a direct line to his conscience, Clara escalated. Unable to fight the bank on facts, she decided to wage war on his character, opening a new front in the most public of battlefields, social media. She crafted a post with the precision of a surgeon, each word chosen to elicit maximum sympathy. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. The post featured a soft-focus photo of her and John from a happier time, a father-daughter dance years ago. The caption was a lament. "So heartbroken. My dear father, a man I love with all my heart, is struggling. In a moment of confusion and memory loss, he's made some financial decisions that have put our family in crisis. We are doing everything we can to get him the help and support he needs during this difficult time. Please send prayers for his clarity and our family's strength." The comments flooded in immediately. "So sorry you're going through this, Clara. Sending love. Dementia's so cruel. You're a wonderful daughter for being so understanding." She had brilliantly reframed his strategic action as the confused lashing out of a senile old man. She hadn't just denied his agency, she had stolen his sanity in the court of public opinion. It was Frank who saw it first, his rage a cleansing fire over the phone. "She's calling you crazy, John. The whole damn city thinks you've lost your mind. She's painting you as a victim so she can play the hero. You have to respond. You have to tell them the truth." John stood in his quiet workshop, the scent of sawdust and old steel a comforting anchor in the storm. He looked at a half-finished birdhouse on his workbench, a simple project built with steady, competent hands. "Fighting her on her terms is a losing game, Frank," he said, his voice the calm center of the hurricane. "You can't win an argument with a lie. You just give it oxygen. She wants a public spectacle. We're not going to give her one." After he hung up with Frank, John moved with quiet purpose. He didn't log on to social media. He didn't draft an angry rebuttal. He went to his basement, to the red file folder. He methodically made photocopies. The loan agreement with his signature and Clara's, stark and undeniable. The bank statements showing the $457,000 transfer from his retirement account and the subsequent wire transfer to a high-end jeweler. He then went to his computer and printed one last thing, a screenshot from the jeweler's website featuring the Clara necklace, a $4.2 million masterpiece listed as sold. He placed these documents into a simple manila envelope. He wrote no letter, no explanation, just a small anonymous sticky note on the front. An interesting story about family values. He drove downtown, not to a bank or a lawyer's office, but to the headquarters of the Denver Post. He walked into the lobby, found the internal mailbox for the paper's most notorious society gossip columnist, a woman known for her sharp pen and her love of exposing the hypocrisy of the city's elite. He slid the envelope into her slot and walked away. He hadn't fought the fire with fire. He had simply handed the truth and a lit match to an arsonist. He didn't know if she would use it, but he knew with chilling certainty that the power to control the narrative was no longer in Clara's hands.
The gossip column landed on a Wednesday, not on the front page, but exactly where it would do the most damage. Buried deep in the society section, a stiletto blade hidden between announcements of debutante balls and charity auctions. The headline was a masterpiece of understated savagery. Miller Family Values, a tale of retirement, rubies, and Rappaport's jewelers? The columnist, Beatrice Fairfax, didn't need to editorialize. She simply laid out the documents John had provided, the loan co-signed by the father, the bank transfer from his retirement account, and the screenshot of the sold-out multi-million-dollar necklace. The article ended with a single devastating sentence. Sources say Clara Miller's father, a retired steelworker, is currently facing financial uncertainty while his daughter enjoys her new investment. The narrative flipped overnight. Clara's carefully constructed image of the dutiful daughter caring for a confused father evaporated, replaced by the portrait of a grifter. The online comment sections became a digital firing squad. Deadbeat daughter, elder abuse, hope the necklace is worth her soul. The public frame job had been publicly dismantled. The first counterattack was predictable. Clara appeared on his doorstep that evening, not with fury, but with a face scrubbed clean of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by a simple gray sweater, her expression a carefully rehearsed mask of sorrow. "Dad," she began, her voice a practiced quaver, "we need to talk. I made a terrible mistake. I wasn't thinking. I was selfish and foolish, and I am so sorry." John watched her from the threshold of his home, his expression unreadable. He let the silence hang in the air, a vast, empty space that her performance could not fill. He did not invite her in. "I know I hurt you," she continued, a single perfect tear tracing a path down her cheek. "But I can fix this. I can make it right. Just tell me what to do. Please, Dad, let me come home." John looked at her, at the daughter who had called him dead weight, at the woman who had sick security on him, and he felt nothing. The emotional well had run dry. He had moved beyond pain into the cold, clean world of accounting. "Have you spoken to the bank's fraud investigators?" he asked, his voice calm and procedural. Clara faltered, the tear on her cheek suddenly looking out of place. I thought we could resolve this as a family first." "Have you returned the necklace?" he continued, his tone unchanging. The question hit her like a physical shock. It's complicated, Dad. There are contracts, insurance." "No, Clara," he said, the finality in his voice like a closing door. "It isn't complicated. Until the $457,000 is back in my account, we are not a family. We are a plaintiff and a defendant. Have your lawyer call mine."
He closed the door, the soft click echoing in the quiet street. The manipulative apology had failed. The second gambit was more desperate and far more depraved. 2 days later, a call from an unknown number. A man's voice strained with professional gravity. "Is this Mr. John Miller? I'm Dr. Evans from Denver General. I'm calling about your daughter, Clara." John's grip on the phone tightened, but his voice remained steady. "What about her?" "I'm afraid she was admitted this morning. A stress-induced cardiac event. She's stable, but she's been asking for you." John felt a flicker of something, a ghost of fatherly concern, but 40 years of welding had taught him to see stress fractures before they became catastrophic failures. This felt wrong, too theatrical. "Thank you for letting me know, Doctor," he said evenly. "I'll be there as soon as I can." But he didn't drive to the hospital. He drove to a small coffee shop down the street, ordered a black coffee, and made a single call. Not to the hospital. To Frank. The call was short, the instructions were simple. 20 minutes later, his phone rang again. It was Frank. "My nephew Tony's a paramedic at Denver General. Just ran the patient logs for the last 24 hours. No Clara Miller, no Jane Doe matching her description. She ain't there, John. It's a damn ghost." John took a slow sip of his coffee. The heat was grounding, real. Then he looked up Clara's number and dialed. She answered on the first ring, her voice a weak, breathy whisper. "Dad, is that you?" "Yes, Clara," he said, his own voice now infused with the cold authority of undeniable truth. "I spoke to your doctor. Sounds serious. Tell Dr. Evans I'm on my way. And tell him that the lead investigator from Sterling Bank's fraud division is meeting me there. He's very eager to take your statement." A choked sound came from the other end of the line, followed by a sharp click. The health gambit had failed. John finished his coffee, left a $5 tip for the $2 cup, and drove home. The war was over. The enemy was routed, cornered, and out of ammunition. All that was left was to salt the earth. As he pulled into his driveway, his phone rang again. This time it was his lawyer. "John," the lawyer said, a note of triumph in his voice. "They're waving the white flag. She'll sign over the necklace, admit to the fraud, do whatever it takes to make this go away. We've won." John looked out at his small, perfect garden, at the birdhouse he was building, a sanctuary of his own making. "No," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Cancel the settlement offer. We're going to court. I want a public judgment." The courtroom was a sterile, impersonal space, all polished wood and muted colors, a stark contrast to the raw emotion of the family drama it was about to formally conclude. Clara sat beside her lawyer, her perfect posture from the Gala now a rigid line of brittle defiance. She looked smaller, diminished without the armor of her stolen wealth. John sat alone on the opposing bench, a pillar of quiet resolve in his simple, clean suit. He didn't look at his daughter. He looked at the judge, at the American flag, at the system of facts and consequences he had put his faith in. The judge, a woman with a no-nonsense gaze, read from the document in front of her, her voice a dispassionate instrument of justice. "Based on the evidence presented," she stated, her words echoing in the silent room, "this court finds Clara Miller liable for the fraudulent liquidation of assets held as collateral. Judgment is entered in favor of the plaintiff, John Miller. The bank is hereby ordered to take immediate possession of the asset purchased with said funds. 1 diamond necklace, item number 74B from the Rappaport collection, to satisfy the defaulted loan. Any remaining value from the sale of the asset after the loan and all associated fees are settled will be returned to the Miller Retirement Fund. There was no outburst, no dramatic gasp, just the clean, quiet, and devastating finality of a ledger being balanced. The reckoning was not a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet, humiliating procedure. 2 days after the judgment, 2 men in crisp, nondescript suits arrived at Clara's front door. She met them in the marble foyer of the house her father's money had bought. They were not aggressive or unkind. They were simply efficient, representatives of a system that no longer cared for her story or her tears. One of them presented a document, the court order authorizing the seizure. Clara read it with a numb, vacant expression, then simply nodded. She led them upstairs to her master bedroom, to the velvet-lined safe hidden behind a full-length mirror. She opened it, the mechanism clicking softly in the quiet room. Inside, resting on black satin, the necklace glittered with a cold, indifferent fire. She did not touch it. One of the men, wearing white gloves, carefully lifted it from the safe and placed it into a simple, lockable briefcase. They did not say thank you. They simply closed the case, turned, and left. Clara stood motionless, watching them go, the empty safe a dark, hollow wound in the wall of her perfect life. Her social currency, bought with her father's past and her own future, was gone. The books were balanced. The account was closed. That evening, John sat on his porch swing, watching the last of the sun's rays paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. His phone buzzed. It was a text from a number he didn't recognize, but he knew who it was from. The message was just 3 words. I have nothing. He read the message, then looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. He thought of the little girl he had pushed on this very swing, the child whose scraped knees he had bandaged, whose dreams he had nurtured with 40 years of sweat and steel. And he mourned for her, for the person she might have been. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement of his thumb, he opened the contact information, scrolled to the bottom, and pressed Block this caller. Then he pressed it again, confirming his choice. He put the phone down on the small table beside him, its screen dark and silent. He felt no triumph, no anger, no satisfaction, only a vast, quiet, and profound peace. The account was closed.
John sold the small brick house a month later, not out of necessity, but out of choice. The quiet rooms, once a sanctuary, now echoed with the ghosts of a life that was over. He bought a small plot of land a few hours west of Denver, nestled in the foothills of the Rockies, where the air was clean and the silence was broken only by the wind in the ponderosa pines. With his own hands, steady and sure, he began to build a new home. Not a fortress this time, but a simple, open cabin with large windows that let in the light and a wide porch that looked out over the mountains. The money from the sale of his retirement necklace, its value now returned to numbers in a bank statement, sat untouched. He didn't need it. His pension was enough. The true value was in the doing, in the feel of the hammer in his hand, in the smell of fresh-cut cedar. He reconnected with old friends from the steel mill, men like Frank, who understood the simple calculus of a hard day's work for an honest wage. They would come up on weekends, not to help, but to share a beer on the half-finished porch, their easy camaraderie a balm for a wound that was slowly healing. He didn't speak of Clara. They didn't ask. They spoke of fishing, of grandchildren, of the quiet satisfaction of a life lived without pretense. He took up woodworking,
his gnarled hands finding a new purpose in shaping raw timber into simple, beautiful furniture. A table, a set of chairs, a rocking horse intricately carved for a grandchild he might never see, but for whom he still felt a distant, instinctual love. One crisp autumn afternoon, as he was putting the final coat of varnish on the rocking horse, a car he didn't recognize pulled into his long gravel driveway. It wasn't a luxury sedan, but a modest, practical hatchback. A young woman got out. For a moment, his heart seized, thinking it was Clara, but this woman was younger. Her dark hair cut in a simple style, her expression open and uncertain. He didn't know her, but she seemed to know him. "Mr. Miller?" she asked, her voice quiet. He nodded, putting down his brush. She walked slowly towards the porch, her gaze taking in the cabin, the mountains, the rocking horse. "My name is Sarah. I was a friend of Clara's. I was at the Gala that night." John said nothing, just waited. "I wanted to tell you," she continued, her eyes meeting his, "that not everyone was fooled. Some of us saw what she was doing, what she had become. And I wanted you to know that what you did, standing up for yourself, it made some of us think about our own lives, our own families." She gestured towards the cabin. "It looks like you found your peace." John looked out at the vast, silent expanse of the mountains, at the golden aspens quivering in the breeze, at the simple, solid home he had built with his own two hands. He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Yes, I believe I have." His journey proved that the greatest power isn't in enduring disrespect, but in meticulously drafting the invoice for it. If you believe in the power of a balanced ledger, subscribe to this channel and witness the next audit. What was the one small thing someone did that proved their disrespect was intentional?